Hey everyone, Rob from Southgate Media Group here. Before we get started with this podcast, we have a quick message. If this is your first time checking out the show, we love that you found us and we really hope you enjoy it. What we have to say is for the subscribers. If you enjoy our shows, would you please donate to help keep these going? We don't want to have to put traditional ads on these shows, but this does cost money. So we really do rely heavily on donations. To make a donation to the show, please go to our website, www.southgatemediagroup.com. Go to the page for the show, and in the upper right-hand corner is a donate button. It takes you right to PayPal, and you can donate whatever amount you want. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. And now, on with the show.
Give me sight beyond sight.
Greetings, Starfighter. You are about to listen to the totally super awesome 80's Reboot Overdrive podcast. Always remember, no matter where you go, there you are. Ready Player One.
Hey bud, let's party.
So what should we talk about?
I had the great opportunity to talk to David Bishop. We talked about Level 257 and, obviously Pac-Man. And then we've got, I talked to Jared Buckner, and he had gave me the idea of talking to you. So, really going along with the 80s arcade theme is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, that's great. That's great. So do you play Pac-Man or any of those games yourself?
I wouldn't say I'm good at them, but I've played them.
Now, who's good at them? Only Billy Mitchell's good. Only Billy Mitchell's good at them.
Yeah, I think Billy Mitchell's got us all beat.
Yeah. So we've made a trading card for Toru Iwatani. He doesn't know about it yet. It borders on it's on the border of approval or not approval, simply because super amount of red tape is needed to get something like that approved. But we just went and made it, and we're going to unveil it and present it to him at the show.
Oh, nice.
Along with a special award. Do you get to go to the show, by the way?
Oh, for Level 257?
Yeah.
Talking to them about going, but I haven't, committed yet. But I'm really leaning towards going, yeah.
Okay, because it's so local to you, I don't see how you could miss it.
Yeah.
I think there's other people elsewhere who would simply die to be in the show, to be in this thing when it launches and everything. Plus, I don't think Toru Iwatani makes too many public appearances.
Oh, he doesn't? Okay.
I don't think he does. I don't think he's been to the U.S. too many times at all, if ever. I don't know. I think I might have met him. I think I might have met him in New York City in June of 2007 when they did the Pac-Man Championship, World Championship. I think it was at the Supper Club, I think was the name of the place. Got some pretty strange names for night spots in New York City. The Supper Club.
Do you do a lot of things with David Bishop?
Well, David Bishop and me and Billy and David Bishop and his daughter are sort of like family. We've gone and done so many things that we seem to, because he comes to our awards, he's come to numerous of our awards ceremonies, and his daughter has dressed up as Pac-Man, I think 3 times in Fairfield, or in Iowa, Fairfield. I live in Fairfield, or Tumwa, next door.
Right.
And so we have a kind of like a family relationship. So David's wonderful. Have you met David yet?
I have. I interviewed him for the podcast. So have you been to Level 257 yet?
Not at all.
Okay.
I just saw it just now, half an hour ago. I saw pictures of it online for the first time.
It is a fabulous place. You'll enjoy it.
It looks like it's extremely well designed and well thought out and well marketed. It seems like a very intelligent. You know how GameWorks and Dave & Buster's attempted to develop a profile or a demographic or just a style, highly stylized. Level 257 seems to be in that same direction of highly well thought out demographics and design and intelligence and organization. So that's what it seems based on what I just saw online about 257. So I'll be pleased to see it. I'll be there, what is it going to be, 2 weeks now from now, I guess? No, 11 days from now.
Yeah. I mean, I think, what, the 22nd? Is that right? Am I getting that date right?
That's right.
Yeah.
The 22nd is considered the 30th anniversary of the birth of Pac-Man.
30th or 35th?
I'm sorry, 35th. No.
Yep.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here as my information manager.
Well, don't trust me for anything else.
Okay.
All right. So, well, first off, let's do an introduction here. I'm talking today to Walter Day, king of video game stats, and I guess authority of video game scorekeeping records. Are we saying you're retired, or is that still an ongoing title for you?
I have retired from the Twin Galaxies Scoreboard, so I don't work as a referee, and I don't work at statistical stuff. I mainly pursue 2 or 3 things in life right now, and none of them are refereeing or scorekeeping. I publish a trading card set. It's now called the Walter Day Collection. It's mainly to define itself as separate from the Twin Galaxies cards, which the set originated under that banner. So the Walter Day Collection of trading cards, I've designed over 2,000 cards or about 1,200 of them already in print and distributed around the world. So it's the funnest thing. I'm very surprised and pleased by how much fun I'm having designing and producing trading cards. It's a great fun, fascinating thing. And now the trading cards have reached a new level of distinction as they become officially recognized and accepted by Beckett Grading Services. Beckett is the famous company that, is involved in the trading card field. They're like leaders of the trading card field. And so our cards are now graded by them and encapsulated by them, and the autographs are authenticated by them. So the cards now have reached been elevated to the status of being investment-grade collectibles. People go online and look for cards graded by Beckett or other companies. They'll see that the cards get frozen in time by being sealed in a protective plastic holder that has a grade on it, like a 9.5 or an 8.5 or something like that. And it determines what the experts look at it like through sometimes microscopes to see if the edges are clean and clear and not crumpled, or the ends are still pointy and not bent or something like that. Then they give it a grade up to 10, which would be pristine. And so that's what we do now. These cards are getting graded as collectible investment collectibles. And believe it or not, all these video game stars who've been around all these years are now becoming the subject of frenetic collectors as they go after autographed high-grade Billy Mitchell or Todd Rogers or Richie Knuckles or other people like that. Maybe there'll be a David White card just around the corner.
Oh,
and
there you go.
Nuts over the David White card.
Outstanding. Do you just have to be touching on the video game industry, or do you actually have to be like a high scorer to get a card?
The trading card set has been created to commemorate the history and culture of the global video game and pinball industries. So the cards are honoring the iconic celebrities of the industry, the legendary industry leaders of the gaming industry, the inventors, the designers, the artists, the video game personalities, as they like to call themselves, the journalists. There are numerous people like yourself who are podcasts who are on cards. The reason they're on cards is because, from my perspective, this very, very big global video game culture just didn't happen overnight. It happened in the same way that a big tapestry that has a design on it or a picture on it, that the picture on the tapestry is made of thousands and thousands and thousands of colorful threads, all intertwined and all working together to form that picture that appears on that woven tapestry. And in the same way, the huge video game culture doesn't exist simply because Ralph Baer did this or because Clifford Blasinski, made Unreal Tournament, or what was the other big one he did? Unreal Tournament and Gears of War, I guess it was. Or because Peter Moore, in his brilliancy, led EA to become a great company. Peter Moore's the CEO. All these different people, they were contributing in the same way that literally millions of people have contributed to the global phenomenon of the global gaming community, gaming culture, and that all of them have a story to tell, because all of us together are literally the pioneers who all were here at the very beginning, working together to make it to become what it is. Because we are still the ones who were the first gamers. We are, that generation is still here. We are the first gamers. And it is our story, the birth of the gaming culture, the birth of the gaming industry. The gaming industry now is different big research groups now have determined the gaming industry is 100 billion plus annual industry. Just simply huge. So essentially, the cards try to capture as many of their stories as possible. So, for instance, we have one card. I don't know if you wanted this long of an explanation, but...
No, it's okay. Please, go ahead.
I think it's good because we have one card, the headline on it says, Honoring Our Volunteers. And on it are a couple people who normally he wouldn't think would be on a trading card, but because they represented a whole demographic or a whole subsection of the gaming culture, of all the people who never get the attention, who are completely in the background, but it is their work and their effort that makes so many big events work and happen. Like every single gaming event you go to, there's hordes of people who they never get any attention. They're never in the spotlight, but they go out there and they do all the work and make that thing happen by just devoting their time or their energy or their money or just their creative intelligence to make sure that that event functions and is successful and that that event serves the public and the gaming community. So we have a card that honors the essential spirit of all the volunteers of the world. Then there's another card for the people who like in the arcade realm, they have their expensive arcade cabinets at home. They'll go and put them on a truck and bring them to something like the California Extreme event or something. All these big events now in every city, people bring their very beloved, very valuable games out of their house and let the public play them for a weekend. So it's another group of people who, without their trust and their devotion and their enthusiasm, very, very few events would actually happen because lots and lots. In other words, the whole thing is that the whole worldwide global video game community is happening not because of a handful of brilliant people who get all the attention in the history books, but because hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people working together making this happen. And that's what these trading cards are all about, capturing the spirit and capturing the hidden side of history of all these people who made this happen, capturing them right now while we're all still alive, while that first generation is still here to tell their story. So that's why the trading cards have all sorts of people in them, from inventors to designers to writers to journalists to podcast people to high score people to contest organizers to contest losers maybe. All sorts of stuff. All sorts of people are in there. And I love it because it's making a tapestry of the times and leaving I think a historical gift. I think, these trading cards, I think the trading cards are going to be more revered and be more fascinating to people 150 years from now than they even are to people right now. Because we're passing on to the future. Just, we're reminding the people in the future when people get so engrossed in such amazingly developed game technology, we want them to remember who we are. We were the first gamers, and that's our story, and that's what the cards are all about.
The heyday of the 80s was the low-res games and just the camaraderie, the social aspect of the arcade culture. That was definitely a lot of great stuff. And I think you'd also honored Jerry Buckner, didn't you?
Oh yeah, Jerry Buckner and his original co-singer Gary Garcia is on a card too.
Right.
Actually, I'm trying to think if the Gary Garcia card's been printed yet or not. We have 1,000 cards that have been designed that haven't been printed yet because it's real expensive. It's expensive to do this. So as I get donations quite often. I mean, I've had people donate thousands and thousands of dollars for just to print the cards just because they want to see them come into existence. We've given away about 250,000 cards as gifts already. Just give them away at events or send them off to people who contact us. Cards are for sale, and there are collectors growing. And we have a website now, so people should write this down. We actually have a website so you can learn more about it. It's called thewalterdaycollection.com. So it's TheWalterdaycollection.com. TheWalterdayCollection.com. So you can see the gallery of all the cards that we have up, or at least a lot of the cards. It's still under development. We don't actually have the public knowing too much about the card, this website yet, because it's still being fixed and developed.
All right, well, very cool. Everybody's definitely got to go check that out. So you got your start by Twin Galaxies, obviously, but I had read somewhere that you were looking at a Time magazine article, and that kind of was the influence of your start?
I was working as an oil broker in Houston, Texas in 1980, and it wasn't going too well. So I and another broker started working on a book. It was going to be a reference book. It was called Days. It was named after me. Days, Who's Who in the Petroleum Industry. And we were working on it, and it was kind of a lot of work, a lot of focus. And then one night, the guy who was working with me on it, he said, I can't do this for another single moment, because we were looking at oil executive biographies, laying them out on pages, for book pages. He says, I got to go play Space Invaders. So I said, well, what the heck is Space Invaders? Well, he said, I'll show you. And essentially, he took me to, this is in Houston, he took me down on the beltway that circles around Houston, and there was a big Malibu Grand Prix, if you remember those.
Oh, yeah.
With the racing cars. And I think there were a few dozen of those around the U.S., but it was a big one in Houston. And I went into the arcade with him, walked in, and the first thing I saw was a row of like 10 Berserk machines. And he took me to a Space Invaders, and he demonstrated and played it, so I played it a few times. And for some reason, I was hypnotized by the games, absolutely mesmerized and amazed by video games. And I found that I absolutely loved playing video games, and it became the main thing I did from then on. And so that when I travel, I try to stop in many arcades as possible and play as many video games as possible. And then when I returned to the Iowa area where I was from, in Ottumwa, Iowa, I opened up an arcade in Ottumwa, Iowa on November 10th, 1981, as an excuse to be able to play more video games. Essentially, 3 months into the process, someone came up to me and says, I can beat that score. I said, what score? And he says, the score that's in this magazine. And he hands me a copy of the January 18th, 1982 edition of Time magazine. And it had a cover story on the phenomena of the growing video game industry. And inside the long, 9-10 page story in there was a few paragraphs and some pictures on Steve Jurassic of Chicago, who had scored 15 million points on Defender on one quarter. And this kid was looking at me in my arcade saying, I can do this, I can beat this. And I doubted it completely. I said, no, this is a champion. We don't have champions in Ottumwa. So anyway, he started playing that weekend, and sure enough, he went up to, I think it was 24 million points in 25 hours. And as it's happening...
No, wait a minute. You said 25 hours?
I think it was 20... It was... I'd have to look it up in the books. It was either 24 hours and 25 million points, or 25...
That is a lot of time, though, regardless.
It was one whole day. It was either 24 hours he played in 25 million points, or 25 hours he played in 24 million points. I can't remember. It's been too many years. But it's in the record.
Impressive nonetheless.
Yeah. And so essentially, but partway through his process, the local news came around and started covering it closely, calling in regularly for updates. And then the TV station started coming in, not just once, but numerous times, to bring up-to-date live broadcasts from Twin Galaxies, where this man is breaking a world record on a video game. Of course, we had no idea if it was a real world record or not. It was just the score that was in the magazine. So they kept coming. And then it got interesting, because then we started getting calls from like ABC in St. Louis. Okay. Then we started getting calls from other TV markets around the Midwest, and calls from Chicago. And then Associated Press, United UPI started calling, which was the rival of AP, Associated Press, and newspapers from other towns began to call. It became a phenomenon where the media all over the place was really interested in this. But by the time Monday morning came and he was done, I tried to find out if this was indeed the world record. So I called Williams Electronics to ask them what the world record was, and they said they didn't know. They said people call us almost every day wanting to know, but we have no idea. No one keeps track of the scores. So then I called Replay and Play Meter magazine, the two industry magazines at that time, and they both said, we have no idea. We get called every day, but no one keeps track of the records. So then I called Williams, I called those two, and then I called 6 other manufacturers and asked them about their games and their scores. And they said they didn't know because no one keeps track of the scores. So I slept on it that night, and the next day I said to my partner, because we had a scoreboard up on the wall like most arcades did, what's your local high score? And whenever I traveled, I'd stop in arcades and I'd write down the scores that I'd see because I was fascinated by the high scores I'd find in games, trying to find the champions. I was fascinated by the excellence in video game playing. So essentially, I called back all 9 of those calls, Replay, Playmeter, Williams, Exidy, Universal, I think it was, Nintendo, Atari, Midway, who am I thinking? Stern. And I told the people who answered the phone that we were keeping track of scores, and that if anybody's interested, and all of them said, we will keep your name and phone number here by our front Rolodex, so that when anybody calls, we'll refer them to you. So miraculously, these 9 people on the other end of the phone were all completely supportive, and this was a great service we're offering them. And it took about a half an hour to make the 9 phone calls. And and whenever they'd ask who we are, I'd tell them that we were the Twin Galaxies Scoreboard. Okay.
Okay.
So I hung up the phone after those 9 phone calls and went back out into the arcade to play Gorf because I was loving to play Gorf at the time. Remember Gorf?
Oh yeah, most definitely.
So I playing Gorf, and I was playing it for a little bit, and then one of my workers comes over and taps me on the shoulder and says, "There's someone on the phone. They're calling from Tennessee. They want to know about a score." So I went to the phone, and sure enough, it was 30 minutes after I had finished my 9 phone calls. We got a call from Goodlettsville, Tennessee, from someone named Casey Murphy to report a score on Galaga. And he told me the score he had. And I looked up at our scoreboard, and our night attendant had a slightly higher score than he. Said, "You have the second highest score in the world." And he goes, "What?" And gets all excited. And he says, "I'll beat that." And so the next day he called back with a higher score. And that was the beginning of the scoreboard. Within days, we're getting 2, 3, 4 phone calls a day. Within weeks, getting 15 to 30 phone calls a day. And, maybe about a year later, we're getting 80, 90, 100 phone calls a day and lots of letters because the magazines began to carry our scoreboard too, like Video Games Magazine, Video Game Player, Computer Entertainment, Joystick, lots of magazines. And then Life Magazine contacted us because the video game manufacturers trusted us to be the leaders of the gaming community because they were the game makers, but we were representing, in a sense, the players. So Life Magazine called us, and it led to that famous photograph in Life Magazine with all the players posing in the street, which I'm sure you've seen.
Oh, yeah.
And then a little bit later, immediately after that, Life Magazine called us, did probably the first really significant all-around video game championship ever, where people had to perform in 5 different games, and then the champions were brought to Hollywood, where they played in That's Incredible Studios. And then our mayor declared us the video game capital of the world because we became a tourist attraction by then. People would come from all over the place just to come to Twin Galaxies. And then finally, the governor of Iowa came and proclaimed us the video game capital of the world. And in that same instance, that same event, Atari came from Los Angeles, Replay Magazine came from Los Angeles, Video Games Magazine came from New York City, and lots of people came from all over the world, I guess, as we were proclaimed the video game capital of the world by Atari. Well, the Amusement Game Manufacturers Association came from Washington, D.C. It was quite a big deal. And so we were launched as the video game capital of the world, and Twin Galaxies became the world's most famous arcade. How about that?
Very, very cool. Very, very great cultural influence of the arcade community. But back in the 80s, or the early 80s and the late 90s, early 80s and mid 80s, how are you keeping all the scores?
Well, eventually we had the computer in the place,
Okay.
Eventually got a computer, but first it was just lots of handwritten papers and notes and sheets and stuff like that, and notebooks. So it was very organic and very primitive at first, but it grew and grew and grew.
So then when somebody would call you, it would be like a notebook that somebody would sit there and search through and make sure and see if that was their world record?
Within a year, we started having it on computers, so we had actual printouts.
Okay. Back then, you were getting the phone calls. How were you getting the validation that, it was an actual legitimate score?
Well, at that point in time, it was a pretty new process, and I, as the leader of the organization, was very trusting, I guess simply because I couldn't believe that people would lie about a video game score. So we relied just on photographs of the final screen with a score on it, and then signed affidavits from the arcade owner and either 2 or 3 witnesses or something like that. So, of course, eventually it turned out that a lot of scores couldn't be trusted because, the arcade, when the arcades began to fail and the big busts began to happen, there were many arcades who were hoping that they could gain fame by becoming the site where people would do world records. So they were very driven to get attention and fame as a world record place, even when the world records weren't really being done. So some falsification did happen way back then. And it was an eye-opener for me. And eventually, as the years went on, we had to switch to videotape so that everybody now, of course, has to have some sort of recorded device going on. I think Twin Galaxies, who I haven't been with for quite some time, I think there's different ways that they do it, but you simply have to have complete videotape documentation so that people watch your entire game. And the experts go and discern what you're doing and make a public decision on whether or not this is indeed a valid performance, or are you using illegal tricks or bugs or flaws or something like that. So it's an interesting process. But back then, we're very innocent, and people would not be truthful with it. But we did our best, I guess. Long before people really had video, the average person had a videotape available to record a video game score. So we had to rely on photographs of the screen.
Right. Okay. You also created like a guidebook or a system of rules for that type of thing also, right?
Oh, yeah. We had by March of 1983, we had a written out. What it is we pioneered the process. We pioneered the world of esports is what it is. What we're talking about is the birth of esports for the whole world.
Okay.
Because we started the tradition of compiled statistics. We started the tradition of compiled body of rules. We started the tradition of honoring and crowning the champions, and started the tradition of creating the rules, enforcing the rules, compiling a body of statistics, and then essentially promoting them as champions. So, developing a core of superstar gamers who became recognized, in the media and the public. So all that started way back then, so it's now being viewed as actually literally the birthplace of esports.
And then you also had a stint as like assistant editor for the Book of World Records, right?
Yeah. See, because we were the only people in the world doing this, Guinness recognized us and accepted our material, our scores, our statistics, right? Our statistics. And so essentially, they would rely on me to produce verified, authenticated scores, and they would publish the scores in their books. We gave the score. The first time we gave them the scores was in July of 83, and then July of 83, 84, 85. So I guess we were in 4 consecutive years of the Guinness Book of World Records. It's now called Guinness World Records, but then it was called the Guinness Book of World Records. And we did contests, I guess a couple times per year, that they would recognize either in the Guinness Book of World Records or the Guinness Book of Sports Records. So it's pretty nice. And in this guise, I functioned as an assistant editor in charge of video game and sometimes foosball and some other stuff scores.
All right, cool. Actually, I want to ask you about Pac-Man. Did you, when Pac-Man first came out, or when Pac-Man was kind of in its heyday, did you believe that it was going to get as popular as it did? And this is going completely off topic from where we were before, so I'm sorry about that.
No, this is fine. This is a good question. I don't think anybody, especially the people who made it, Namco, I don't think especially they didn't expect any phenomenon like this to happen. Because Pac-Man Pac-Man didn't literally single-handedly make things happen, but it was hugely instrumental in facilitating the growth of the arcade industry. Now, before Pac-Man and Space Invaders and a few other select titles, the world of computerized games, meaning video games and pinball stuff like that, it was small. And most of those games you'd find in an old-fashioned recreational center, which I think for a long time were very smoky places, and also maybe where a tougher crowd hung out, because there'd be pool tables there. There would be a jukebox there, there'd be a cigarette machine there. And then video games started coming in. But video games didn't make much of a change at first. Recreational pool halls is where the coin-operated games commonly would be in most towns way back then. But then these video games started appearing, Pac-Man being the most amazing one of them all. But Space Invaders, Pac-Man, other ones too. And they started attracting more people than commonly would be expected to appear in a recreational center. And at some point in time, it just morphed. It morphed out of the old recreational footprint, and people started opening up rooms of just video games. And with pinball too, but mostly sometimes there was a phase there where they only had video games. They didn't have pinball. People thought pinball broke down too much and that video games were making 10 times as much money as a pinball. So somehow it morphed out of the old historical, like personality of being a smoky pool hall recreational center, and modern video game arcades began to appear. And also they were opened by people who were not actually part of the old recreational coin-op industry. A lot of the coin-op stuff that was out there, the cigarette machines, the jukebox, the pool tables, the pinball, and then the novelty games like the gun games and the bowling games, they were primarily operated by a lot of families who had been around probably from the teens and the 20s and the 30s, and maybe some of them did have connection to organized crime. Who knows which one of those would be, but they come from a long time ago. So that by the time the video game industry started as we know it with the arcades, there were lots and lots and lots of families who had been there for 30, 40, 50, 60 years by that time in history. Now suddenly, Pac-Man and Space Invaders is making so much money that doctors and dentists and lawyers and other kinds of entrepreneurs suddenly jump in, and a whole new kind of person is now involved in the coin-op industry, completely different from the old-time people who had been in there for 3 or 4 generations. So there was an interesting transformation, and they all went in there thinking that they were going to make a killing. But every time you bought an arcade cabinet back in the 1981, 82, 83 era, you were paying $29.50, meaning $2,950, up to like $33.50 per game, depending on which game it was. So that's pretty close to the price of a car way back then. Right. The car might have cost slightly more, but essentially, if you're an arcade operator and you look around your arcade, you're seeing 20 parked cars inside your arcade, because that's how many mortgages you're paying. And that's what happened. Lots and lots and lots of distributors got great credit from the factory so that they could get games as fast as they could and get them out there on location. So the factories gave credit, then the distributors gave credit to the operators, then the operators put them in as many arcades as they could, so that the huge leveraged debt load got higher and higher and higher. And then as that debt load was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, all the rivalry started with the token war started, and a huge glut of arcades, so that 5 or 6 arcades could be in the same middle-sized town. Maybe a town of 40,000 would have 5 or 6 arcades, and they all have their token wars and their rivalries. And eventually it's getting harder for all of them to coexist and pay those mortgages, and all those games they're in there. And they're trying to beat each other, and then the new game phenomena really begins to develop even further, because if the kids get bored with the games, Arcade X across the street will bring in a brand new game, and all your clientele will leave your arcade and go across the street to play the new game. Even if you have 25 great games, the new game would steal the whole clientele, will go across the street. So you have to lay out the money and pay for another car mortgage to bring another new game in to offset their new game, and then the people run back across the street. So the arcades were trapped in a cycle of heavy leverage debt load, with the population becoming more and more disenchanted with the games you have. And so just a huge debt load as the amount of income became less and less and less and less, while more and more arcades were trying to split up an ever-shrinking pie of local income of quarters. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that was from my perspective what I saw happening.
No, it makes sense. I'm just trying to think of the math now of how many quarters would it take to make a profit then?
You know, I over the years I remember walking into a Barrel of Fun. That was the name of a chain, Barrel of Fun in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And I think the most we ever made in a single week, in my best arcade week for Twin Galaxies, might have been like $2,800 or something in a single week. And that only happened like probably once before we began to have the bust hit us. But I remember walking to this arcade. It was a bigger arcade than mine. It was Chapel Hill, lots of college students. You know, the guy says, "Oh, we make $8,000 per week, sometimes a little more." They're making like 4 times what I make, and they probably had higher overhead too. But the thing is that it would be different for each arcade how much they needed to break even. But the thing that was the crazy thing is how many arcades were opened up in a small place, because each of these warring factions, doctors and all sorts of professional people who normally would never have been in the coin-operated industry, but they saw what was genuinely the huge success at the very beginning. Back in 80 and 81 and 82, man, there were some people becoming... I know one guy who had an arcade in Ann Arbor, and he was a very smart investor, and he took all the money he was making every week for the first 3 or 4 years, and then invested it and put it into whatever funds or whatever. And so he walked out of there with millions of dollars and sold the arcade and went on to do other things with his money. Most people crashed and burned, but if a person was an intelligent businessman, they could have made it. But later on in the game, they couldn't have, because the leverage debt load was too high. Players were beginning to not spend as many quarters, and plus you had more arcades to split up whatever amount of quarters that local city's population could generate.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about Wreck-It Ralph. I had read like there's some comparison to you and the arcade owner in that, but I've never seen it actually reference that it was actually you as the model for that character. Is that can you confirm that?
Apparently Wreck-It Ralph is supposed to be me. I mean, Mr. Litwack is supposed to be me.
Okay.
Apparently, based on a bunch of things. One thing that's interesting is the amount of people who think he looks like me. Because it started happening from the very beginning. Suddenly there was a big cry on online saying, "Wow, that's got to be Walter Day." And I thought, does it really look like me? Could it possibly really be me? And then I noticed something interesting. The referee outfit, the referee shirt that I wear, was a very uncommon one. And if you were to go like on Google and look for it under images for referee shirt, you'd find lots and lots of different models, but you wouldn't find my model. So I kept looking, and then finally I found one of all the shirts. None of them were the shirt I was wearing. However, Mr. Litwack has my exact shirt with the exact cuffs and collar and all that kind of stuff that I wear. So I thought, well, that's an interesting coincidence. It is my shirt, and most people don't find that shirt if they look for that particular referee shirt online. And when I was younger, I actually looked like Mr. Litwack, because I used to wear a mustache just like that. And so there I was, looked like me. But then I found a website. There was a website on the Wreck-It Ralph movie, and on this website, it stated that Mr. Litwack was based on Walter Day, founder of Twin Galaxies.
But it's nothing that like Disney had contacted you and said, "Hey, we want to use your likeness."
Oh, no, Disney didn't contact me at all.
Okay.
This came out of the clear blue.
Okay. Still an honor, though, right?
I'm very honored, but it's kind of a surprise. It's an interesting surprise.
Okay. Fair enough.
Don't know too much about what to say, but apparently it's supposed to be me.
Okay. Our listeners, how do you want them to stay in contact with you? Keep up with what you're doing.
Well, if you want to see the David White trading card, you're going to have to come to the Walter Day Collection. TheWalterDayCollection.com. By the way, I hope I gave you the stuff that you could use tonight, because there's so many things we could be talking about, you know?
Well, what I want to do, I want to respect your time. I know you're busy, and I know you got a lot of things going on, so I don't want to take you all night. But, if you've got more stories to share, then please.
Okay, well, one thing is you should come to level 257 as you can, so you can meet Billy Mitchell, because Billy will be there. Because Billy is a great fan. Billy likes people a lot, so you get a kick out of meeting him, he get a kick out of meeting you. That's Friday, May 22nd, of course.
Right.
Plus, I think he's doing, I just read online, I didn't even know this, he's doing a promotion where he's going to go head-to-head with other people and play them in Pac-Man or something.
Oh, okay.
Definitely not Missile Command. Probably Pac-Man.
Well, they've got that the one game that's at the final level, at the split screen right there at level 257.
Oh, yeah. Maybe that's what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the promotion he's going to do. That would be great. Anyway, I'm honored to be on your show. It's very nice that you had the time to call me. And I've been doing a lot of stuff getting ready for all these Chicago events, having to go there 3 weekends in a row. So it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful time. And people who want to keep in touch with me should come and send me an email through my website, which is the Walter Day Collection. And they'll be able to see the trading cards that we're making to honor all the different people who contribute to the global video game culture. Because, who knows? Someone out there who's listening to your podcast, they may be worthy of being on a trading card, because it's not about video game high scores. It's all about, the community and how people support and honor the community and give tremendous contributions from their heart, from their wallet, their energy, their time, their creativity, to make the global community become the wonderful thing that it's becoming. And those are the kind of people that I love putting on trading cards, even far more than people who get the highest score on Buzzsaw Attack or whatever game they're playing.
Yeah, it's safe to say I'm never going to get in one of those the high score cards, but hopefully the podcasting will get me there.
Could be.
But I'm not very good at many of them. In fact, I think recently I played Donkey Kong not too long ago, and I couldn't even get past like the first few levels. There's no hope for me.
Donkey Kong's tough. Donkey Kong's tough. It's some people do consider it just about the hardest game.
So what about you? What's your game of choice?
Well, when I was playing video games, of course, I loved playing Centipede. I loved playing Make Tracks. I loved, old-time games that I played when I first started. Gorf, Galaxian, Make Tracks, Centipede. I like Wizard of War. I like Mousetrap. I like the one called Tutankhamun, King Tutankhamun. And I guess they're all games from 1982-83.
Okay. So do you ever get any games that you're like trying to rival Billy Mitchell at?
Oh, somehow I don't have any desire. I don't have any desire to be a world record holder.
Okay.
It's not a valuable enough accomplishment to me personally, even though I recognize it's a valuable accomplishment to lots of other people. I just don't consider it my time. Well, to actually get a world record on a game is a huge outlay of time and energy and effort and focus and attention. And I just don't have those resources available to spend anymore on playing video games. So, because, the amount of attention and time and energy and effort and creativity I have to spend on doing the trading cards and other things is just far more paramount now in my life. So I will probably never even be a contender, no less the world record holder on anything.
Yeah, I'd heard that you do more on your music now, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do more on my music. I'm writing a musical.
Very cool.
Yeah, so a musical is an interesting thing because it really challenges. To be frank with you, the most wonderful thing about doing the musical is that it is so challenging to me. It requires for me to be so much smarter than I am to figure out how the story works and how the lyrics support the story, how the story supports the lyrics, how the music supports the story and the lyrics. Having the story of the musical is called the libretto. In other words, it's the book. They also call it the book. It's the story. Then there's the music. Then there's the lyrics. Then there's the stage directions and the choreography. There is so much stuff to completely challenge my limited intelligence that I love it because it is my firm belief that that's how you become better. by just throwing yourself at something that is so over the top for you, so challenging, that you just have to grow in ways you otherwise may never have bothered to grow or ever had the opportunity to grow. So this is one of the most important things I think I've ever done in my life, because it's just like what would happen if the 1969 Celtics had to play, this year's NBA champions? Well, the modern basketball players are faster and stronger and actually more well-trained. I think they're probably all better shooters and stuff like that too, but they got a lot more body weight, a lot more size, a lot more strength, a lot more speed than the 1969 Celtics. But if the Celtics were there and they saw how overmatched they were, they would probably rise to the occasion on a level they had never done before, because they just get inspired and they just had to do what they had to do. So I'm trying to rise to the occasion by doing something that is so completely out of my comfort zone, that has taken me on a higher level of focus and creative thought, and really focusing on it and making it happen. So that's why writing this musical is possibly the greatest thing I've ever done for myself, because it's making me have to build new synaptical connections in my brain to try and figure it out.
So what's the musical about, or can you tell me?
So it's the story of Twin Galaxies back in the beginning. It's the story of the birth of the video game age. So it's great. It should be a lot of fun.
How much longer before anyone gets to see it?
I actually sat here and sang around. I did a sing through for someone who was visiting from St. Louis. There's, I think, 22 songs in it. The music for all the songs is pretty well figured out. The lyrics is hard because the lyrics has to match the plot, or what they call the story or the book. Okay, the libretto, they also call it in ancient Italian. And so it's complicated because they're like the legs of a table. All the table legs work together to support the table. So the story, the music, the lyrics all have to work together. So as soon as I finish the actual story plot and see how it flows, then I can finish the lyrics, because the music is the easy part for some reason. That seems to be the strongest talent I have as I go into doing this. I think we've covered some good stuff.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay, partner.
Thank you, sir.
Good night, Dave.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80's Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80's Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80's Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.